two black teenagers walked into a car dealership, filled with nothing but optimism and politeness. Within minutes they were asked to leave, deemed simply trouble. The very next day their father, a billionaire, arrived. Not to raise his voice in anger, but to ensure the entire world understood what truly transpired. The sun hung heavily over Tempe that afternoon. It was one of those slow, dry Arizona days where the heat vibrated off the pavement. Malik Townsend had just finished track practice, his gray t-shirt stuck to his back as he walked beside his sister, Ayanna, across the parking lot of Madison Auto Gallery. They weren't there with ill intent. In fact, Malik had been looking forward to this stop all week. "I'm not saying I'm driving home in a car today," he mentioned, adjusting the strap of his gym bag, "but I want to check out their selection. Maybe something pre-owned just to get an idea before my birthday." Ayanna laughed softly, tossing her braids over her shoulder. "You seriously think Dad will let you take a two-door coupe to school by yourself?" He smiled back, not slowing his pace. Let a guy fantasize. The dealership lot was hushed, lines of gleaming silver sedans positioned beneath sun-bleached banners. The glass doors shimmered in the intense heat, and the pair entered like any young visitors with a few questions and wide-eyed curiosity. Inside, the air conditioning felt sharp, a stark contrast to the warmth outside. A middle-aged man in a light blue dress shirt glanced up from behind a counter. His eyes landed on Malik first, then slid to Ayanna. They were dressed simply, neatly, Malik in athletic wear, Ayanna in a plain dress and sneakers. Nothing unruly, nothing loud. Yet the man got to his feet quickly. "Can I assist you?" His voice was abrupt. Malik, always courteous, stepped forward. "Yes, we're just looking at cars. Potentially interested in something used. My birthday is next month." "Do you have an appointment?" the man interrupted, already moving towards them. Malik hesitated. "No, we do not permit unaccompanied minors in the showroom," he cut in, a swift look towards a colleague across the room. "It's company policy." Ayanna's expression shifted. "We aren't touching anything. Regardless, this is not a place for loitering." His tone turned colder. "You can view our inventory on the website if you're interested." The silence that followed was palpable. Malik started to speak, then closed his mouth. Ayanna's fingers tightened around her bag strap. "We'll leave," Malik stated quietly. And they did. No argument, no confrontation, just the measured walk back across the asphalt. Ayanna held her breath the entire time. She waited until they were in the back seat of the Uber before she spoke. "That man looked at us like we were nobody." Malik nodded once, subtly, his jaw tight. He tapped his phone screen, checked the ride estimate, and stared out the window. Ayanna watched her brother's reflection in the glass. She disliked his quietness. He wasn't naturally loud, but this was different. It wasn't silence, it was restraint. She'd witnessed that same look on their father's face before. "You're not going to tell Dad, are you?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know," Malik finally said. "I don't even know what to call it." He didn't say anything overtly offensive, he just made it clear he didn't want us there. Bonna leaned back. "It felt pretty offensive to me." Neither spoke for the remainder of the ride. They didn't need to, they both knew exactly what had occurred. But the man at the dealership had no inkling of who he'd just dismissed. And by the following morning he was about to find out. The Uber curved through the winding hills of Paradise Valley, where the homes became grander, more secluded, and more spread out the higher they ascended. Behind the tinted windows of the black SUV, Ayanna sat with her arms folded, still inwardly seething. Malik remained silent, phone in hand, screen off, his thoughts elsewhere. Their house came into view. A contemporary property of white and stone, set discreetly behind a gate. Not overtly flashy, but possessing that subtle expense indicative of inherited wealth or exceptionally shrewd financial success. Their father, Charles Townsend, had forged his tech empire from humble beginnings, starting with computer repairs in Flagstaff before hitting a major success with a data security startup. Nowadays his name appeared in Forbes features and Silicon Valley discussions, but locally he was simply Charles. The kids entered through a side door and placed their things by the bench near the kitchen. The house carried a faint aroma of cedar and clean linen, home. Their housekeeper, Mrs. K, looked up from the dining table where she was folding towels. "Hey everyone, is everything good?" Ayanna mumbled a quiet response. Malik didn't answer. From down the hall their father's voice carried. "Malik." He appeared in the hallway moments later, still in his navy polo, barefoot, holding a tablet. "You're back earlier than expected." Malik gave a slight shrug. "Didn't end up staying long." Charles immediately noticed the subtle droop in his son's shoulders, the way he avoided eye contact. He glanced at Iona. Her expression revealed more than she likely intended. "What happened?" Malik stayed quiet. Charles set the tablet down and folded his arms. "Malik." Iona sighed. "Some guy at the car dealership said we weren't allowed inside." Charles frowned. "Which one?" "Madison Auto Gallery, off University Drive." "And what exactly did he say?" Malik rubbed the back of his neck. "He didn't want us looking around. Said they don't let minors in without a parent. Basically accused us of hanging out." Charles didn't move for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, not with anger, but with focused, deliberate calculation, the kind that suggested he was thinking several steps ahead. "What did you do?" "We left," Malik replied. "Didn't want to create a scene." That landed heavily. Charles took a breath, stepped into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. He handed it to Malik before speaking again. "You handled yourselves correctly. Do you understand?" Malik nodded once. But then his father sat down on a counterstool and looked directly at him. "I need you to grasp something significant. You are not inferior to anyone. It makes no difference if you enter a place wearing track gear or a tuxedo. You conduct yourselves with dignity. And if someone chooses to perceive you as a problem, that is their failing, not yours." Iona leaned against the refrigerator listening. Charles continued, his voice low and steady. "However, you should also recognize this. Silence isn't always a sign of strength. Sometimes, you permit people to get away with minor offenses and they will repeat them with the next person and the one after that." Malik swallowed hard. "So what will you do?" Charles didn't answer immediately. He looked at both of them, then stood up and took his phone from his pocket. "I am going to have a discussion." Iona blinked. "With whom?" "With whoever is in charge of that establishment," he said, walking out of the room. "Tomorrow morning." The subsequent few hours passed with an unusual quietness. No raised voices, no urgent calls. Charles prepared dinner as usual: grilled salmon, asparagus, rice. They ate as a family, but something in the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't anger, it was a quiet resolve. That night, Malik lay staring at the ceiling for a long time before sleep came. He wasn't entirely certain what his dad meant by a discussion, but he had a feeling it would be far more impactful than any shouting could ever be. And across town, the man at the dealership had no idea that a reckoning was already underway. Madison Auto Gallery unlocked its doors precisely at 9 a.m. By 8:45, staff members were already filtering in, keys jangling, coffee cups in hand, sunglasses still perched on their noses, the standard Monday morning rhythm. Derek Holton, the assistant sales manager, leaned against the front desk with his iced Americano, scrolling through his phone. He barely recognized half the names in his inbox anymore. Turnover was considerable. The position paid well if you were skilled at sales, and he was. By 9:03 they had a single customer in the lot. A navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom, gleaming immaculately under the Arizona sun. It didn't park in a designated spot. It didn't idle out of the way. It glided directly to the front doors and stopped. No one emerged at first. Derek glanced at the receptionist, then stepped from behind the counter. "Are we expecting an appointment?" "Nope," she replied, eyes fixed on the vehicle. Then the door opened. Out stepped a tall figure in a dark blazer, trousers pressed sharp enough to crease air, shoes polished to a mirror finish. He moved deliberately, calmly, with no unnecessary motion. He pushed open the glass door and stood at the entrance for a moment. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth yet firm. "I am looking for your manager." Derek hesitated. I'm the assistant manager. How may I help you?" The man looked directly at him. "You are not who I need." That's when Kyle Lenson, the general manager, emerged from a side office, tall, red-faced, perpetually appearing slightly overwhelmed. "Morning," he said quickly. "I'm Kyle. May I inquire what brings you in today?" The man reached into his jacket pocket and presented a card. Kyle read the name slowly. Charles Townsend, founder and chairman, TNS Global. He looked up, his face visibly losing color. Wow sir. I wasn't anticipating." I imagine you weren't, Charles replied, stepping further inside. I won't occupy much of your time. Kyle gestured towards his office, his eyes flicking towards Derek. We can discuss this in here. But Charles remained stationary. There's no necessity for privacy. This is a public establishment. My remarks will take only a few minutes. Kyle nodded stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. Of course. Please proceed. Charles surveyed the showroom. Yesterday, 2 young individuals entered this space. One was my son. The other my daughter. Kyle blinked, his throat bobbing. I understand. They were informed they were not permitted to browse, that they should depart, that this location was not suitable for them. Sir, we have. Charles held up a hand. I am not here to dispute. I am not here seeking reimbursement. I personally did not lose anything yesterday. But you did. You squandered the chance to treat 2 young people correctly, 2 individuals who were raised to extend respect to others, even when it isn't returned. A few other staff members had begun to gravitate closer, feigning interest in organizing papers or wiping surfaces. Charles continued. My children are not disruptive elements. They are thoughtful, intelligent, raised with care. They do not require your validation. But they absolutely should have been treated like human beings, not like potential threats. Derek looked down at his shoes. The receptionist had completely stopped typing. Kyle cleared his throat. Mr. Townsend, if I may. I am not requesting an apology, Charles stated. Apologies are easily given. What is truly important is what you believe when you are unobserved, the choices you make when you assume no one will hold you accountable. He paused, allowing the silence to undo his words. Because the next time it will not involve my children. It might involve someone who does not have a father with a list of media contacts. And they will depart this place carrying a memory you will never hear about, but one they will carry for the remainder of their lives. He turned to leave. Just before pushing the door open, he added without looking back, you can conduct a luxury business without operating with a small mindset. I sincerely hope you learn how. Outside, a small assembly had convened. 2 people were recording with their phones. One local reporter alerted by a tip and a woman holding a microphone. Charles hadn't summoned them. The word had simply gotten out. The air outside had changed, not in temperature but in its palpable weight. Charles stepped down onto the dealership pavement with calm, deliberate ease. His expression remained unperturbed at the sight of the small crowd forming. 2 local college students stood slightly to the side, phones out, quietly conversing. One woman from KXM5 News was already mid-sentence, murmuring into her mic, unsure if she was even broadcasting live. Charles didn't raise his voice or seek a platform. He simply stopped near the front door, adjusted the cuff of his jacket and spoke. I had not planned to make any remarks today, he began, but I understand how situations like this unfold. If I don't articulate it now, someone else will attempt to interpret it for me. He looked up, surveying the few faces watching him. My son Malik and my daughter Iona came here yesterday afternoon. They were not boisterous. They were not interfering with anything. They came here simply to browse, like any young person with a touch of excitement and aspiration. His voice didn't falter. It wasn't loud but quiet enough to make people lean in attentively. However, they were asked to leave. Not because they broke any rule. Not because they touched anything they shouldn't have. But because someone decided they did not belong here. That they were inherently a problem before they even spoke a single word. The college student holding the phone let out a soft, shaky breath, thick with emotion. Charles continued. I have dedicated my entire professional life to building something lasting, and I have instructed my children that what you build isn't solely measured in your bank account. It resides in how you treat people, in the routine decisions made when no one is observing. He paused again, not for theatrical effect, but because the next words held profound significance. Yesterday someone looked at my children and failed to see who they were. They saw who they presumed them to be and they dismissed them. You do not need to raise your voice to be disrespectful. You simply need to make someone feel diminished in a place they were looking forward to entering. Behind the glass doors, Kyle stood watching, hands thrust deep into his pockets. Charles glanced briefly over his shoulder, then turned back to the people in front of him. I am not calling for the closure of this establishment. I do not believe in that approach. I am no longer even angry. I am simply weary of witnessing this pattern repeat itself, Good young people being perceived as criminals before they have done anything wrong. That kind of experience lingers, and if it is not addressed, it will simply continue. A few more onlookers had stopped on the sidewalk. A delivery driver across the street lowered his sunglasses for a better look. I appeared here today because my children did not merit that kind of treatment. And because I want them to witness that when faced with injustice, you do not merely endure it. You confront it with clarity, with composure, and without permitting it to transform you into that which you oppose. He stepped back towards the Rolls-Royce, his hand on the door handle. One final point, he added without turning back. My children departed here yesterday with their heads held high. That speaks volumes about them and nothing about the individual who attempted to minimize them. He opened the car door and got in without another word. The crowd did not applaud. No one cheered. They simply stood there, processing what they had heard, what they had seen, and what it implied about countless other situations. Inside the dealership, Derek slowly sank into a chair. The receptionist had tears in her eyes, unsure why. Kyle Lenson remained by the window, arms held rigidly at his sides. But even he understood it was now too late to manage the narrative. By that afternoon, the initial video clip was circulating on Twitter, then Instagram, then national news platforms. The story began to develop a life of its own. By the time lunch arrived, the narrative had moved beyond local confines. What started as a shaky vertical phone video recorded by a college freshman named Tori Clemens had already surpassed 2 million views on X. The caption read, "This man just walked into a dealership that disrespected his kids and handled it with incredible grace. I'm genuinely speechless." People weren't just sharing the video, they were scrutinizing it, freezing frames, zooming in, debating the tone, arguing in lengthy comment threads. Under one post, a woman from Flagstaff commented, "Charles Townsend repaired my dad's laptop in 2001 and wouldn't accept payment. That man has been fundamentally decent from the start." Not all responses were supportive. One account, featuring an anonymous Eagle profile picture, commented, "Why didn't the kids just mention who their father was? Sounds like they wanted to play the victim role." And just like that, the story snowballed. Morning talk shows featured it. Good Morning Phoenix aired a segment titled, "Tech Billionaire Father Confronts Discrimination at Tempe Car Dealership." Within hours, the dealership's Yelp rating plummeted from 4.2 to 2.1. Dozens of one-star reviews appeared rapidly. "Rude and dismissive staff treated my teenage son like a criminal, absolutely never returning, and if you're not in a suit and tie, don't bother entering. They'll ask you to leave before you even utter a sound." Of course, not all the criticism came from anonymous strangers. Local activist groups began engaging with the story as well, promoting conversations about the perception of youth and subtle everyday biases. In the midst of the whirlwind, the dealership released a statement, a rather generic 2-paragraph apology posted on their website and Instagram. "We regret the recent incident that occurred at our showroom and are actively reviewing our policies. We aim to provide a welcoming environment to all guests and take these matters with utmost seriousness." The comments beneath it were revealing. "You're only apologizing because you were caught. Reviewing policies? How about reviewing your staff's behavior? This apology has the sincerity of a parking ticket." Behind the scenes, Kyle Lenson was in full damage control. He had already consulted 2 PR consultants, both offering identical advice. Speak minimally, maintain a low profile, and refrain from attempting to manipulate the narrative. But the internet wasn't operating on PR timelines. People demanded transparency, accountability, and tangible steps. Meanwhile, Malik and Ayanna were at home, both their phones buzzing with messages. Some from friends, others from numbers they didn't even recognize. Ayanna showed her brother one that made them both laugh despite the circumstances. "Girl, is that your dad on the news? Tell him to run for office or something, I'm dying." But then came the less pleasant messages. "Why didn't you just leave? Nobody owes you a car. It's not always about race. He probably thought you were skipping school. Oh, so wealthy people want sympathy now?" Malik stared at his screen, his jaw tight. Ayanna gently nudged his shoulder. "Don't look at that stuff." He didn't respond, still scrolling. Their father entered the room holding 2 mugs of tea. "Phone's down," Charles said softly. "Just for a moment." Malik hesitated, then finally placed his phone face down on the table. Ayanna followed suit. Charles sat across from them, leaning slightly forward. You two didn't seek this out, but sometimes life dictates that your personal story becomes part of a broader conversation. Ayana frowned. But we didn't actually do anything. We just walked in. I understand, he said. And that is precisely what makes this so significant. You did everything correctly and yet someone saw you incorrectly. Malik stared at the tabletop. Is it always going to be like this? Charles let the question hang in the air for a beat. No, he replied, but you will encounter similar situations again. And when you do, that is the moment you choose who you want to be. Outside the house, reporters still lingered. Inside, something more potent than anger was taking root. Awareness. And awareness, once gained, does not simply vanish. The sun dipped lower behind Camelback Mountain, casting long, stretching shadows across the Townsend backyard. 2 days had passed since Charles had spoken at the dealership, 2 long, quiet days filled with headlines, notifications, and public noise. But here, sheltered behind the hedges, a sense of calm prevailed. Charles stood at the grill, flipping salmon fillets with a steady rhythm. Malik sat at the patio table, elbows resting on his knees, looking out over the lawn. Ayana leaned against the railing, her face obscured in her hoodie. No cameras, no questions, just family. You know, Charles began without looking up from the grill. When I was 16, I saved diligently for 2 years to acquire my first car. A '94 Corolla, paint faded red. Had to manually crank the windows down. Ayana glanced towards him. You said it didn't have AC, right? Not an ounce, Charles chuckled. The Phoenix summer nearly baked me alive. But I adored that car. Not because it was luxurious but because I earned it. Malik finally turned his head. Were you ever treated like that? Like we were? Charles nodded. More times than I can possibly count. Experienced being followed in stores. Faced rejection when trying to secure bank loans. There was one time I was refused service at a diner in Tucson. Sat there with my coding books in my lap. Everything. Didn't make a scene, just left. But why didn't you say something back then? Malik asked. Like you did now? Charles flipped another fillet. Because back then I didn't believe my voice held any significance. I genuinely thought keeping a low profile was the only way to advance. He paused. But I was wrong. The grill hissed quietly. Here's the fundamental point, son. You spend enough time internalizing disrespect, you start to forget what it feels like to be acknowledged. And I would never wish that upon you or your sister. Ayana sat down beside her brother. Well, you certainly made sure we were seen. Charles looked at both of them. Now being seen isn't the end goal. You must be prepared for everything that accompanies it. The commendation, the critique, the people who will admire you for standing up, and the ones who will harbor resentment. Malik looked down at his hands. I didn't even want this to become a major event. I just wanted to look at a car. I know, Charles said. And that's precisely what makes it so potent. You weren't performing. You were simply living your life, and someone disliked the appearance of that. They sat with that thought for a moment. I am proud of you, Charles added. Both of you. You didn't resort to shouting. You didn't attempt to prove anything. You simply remained authentic to yourselves. Bonna shrugged. It didn't feel particularly courageous. It's not meant to, he replied. Courage is often understated. It's simply the refusal to compromise your decency in a world that sometimes lacks it. A prolonged silence settled over the yard. Then Ayana smirked. So, are we actually still going to look for a car or not? Charles grinned. I anticipated you might ask. Malik sat up straighter. Wait, for real. Charles tossed a set of keys across the table. They landed near Malik's hand with a soft jingle. Check the garage tomorrow, he said. But understand it's not primarily about the vehicle itself. It's about the character you develop while driving it. That holds more importance than anything with an engine. Ayana leaned into her brother, teasing him. You better not wreck it on the very first day, please. Malik shot back. I'll be driving it like it's crafted from glass. Charles laughed, and for the first time in days, the weight of the recent events began to dissipate. Some stories conclude with public outcry, others with quiet acceptance. But this one ends with a profound lesson. Sometimes the most effective way to push back is to remain standing, composed, truthful, and unwavering. And that's the scene. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share it. Don't forget to subscribe to discover other stories that make us think, connect us and remind us of our true nature.